Welcome to Tibet This Week, where we bring you a weekly news edition on His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Tibet and the Central Tibetan Administration. These are the headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama wishes the President of India on her birthday. His Holiness the Dalai Lama joins the Medicine Buddha prayers. His Holiness the Dalai Lama congratulates the new Prime Minister of Mongolia. Sikyong launches bilingual Thupten website. Celebration of the Year of Compassion begins. Central Tibetan Administration welcomes a resolution honoring His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama in the US Congress. Central Tibetan Administration congratulates Australia's new Shadow Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade. United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and European Union raises concern over Tibet's religious freedom. Tibetans and Chinese unite in protest as 59th United Nations Human Rights Council sessions begin. Dawa Sangmo, Office of Tibet Australia, meets formerly imprisoned journalist Cheng. Coordinator Thupten Tsering attends 35th anniversary of French Tibet Support Group. Office of Tibettv observes Dawa month. Yesterday, His Holiness Dalai Lama wrote to Draupadi Murmu, the President of India, on her 67th birthday. In the letter, His Holiness expressed the special closeness he feels towards India and thanked the Government of India for hosting him and the Tibetans since 1959. Last Sunday, His Holiness Dalai Lama joined several thousand people at Tuglakhang, the main Tibetan Buddhist temple, Dharamsala, to recite prayers to the Medicine Buddha. The event was organized and led by monks and lamas of Tsering Monastic College in honor of His Holiness's forthcoming 90th birthday. His Holiness Dalai Lama wrote to Zanta Shatar Kombujav to congratulate him on his election as the Prime Minister of Mongolia. In the letter, His Holiness recalls his first visit to Mongolia in 1979, the unique tie that Mongolians and Tibetans share since the time of the third Dalai Lama, Sonam Gyatso, and wished the new Prime Minister best in fulfilling the hopes and aspirations of people of Mongolia. On Wednesday this week, Sikyong Tsering of the Central Tibetan Administration held a press briefing to launch the Thupten website and to announce a year-long global celebration of His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama's 90th birthday. Sikyong during the press briefing highlighted series of events and festivals that will be celebrated here in Dharamsala and across the world, and further noted that the Thupten website was developed to showcase His Holiness's achievements and teachings, publicizing events held in honor of His Holiness's 90th birthday. CTA is designating July 6, 2025 to July 5, 2026 as the Year of Compassion, honoring His Holiness's lifelong commitments to non-violence, global peace, the preservation of Tibetan culture, interfaith harmony, human rights advocacy, and promotion of secular ethics through education. Beginning the global 90th birthday celebration of His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama, the Association of Ex-Artists from the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts in New York and New Jersey presented a theatrical performance of a Tibetan opera based on the life of Jesu Milarepa at the Tibetan Community Center of New York and New Jersey. The Tibetan Association of Boston and the Kurukula Center for Tibetan Buddhist Studies jointly organized a gathering of representatives from various religious traditions on the 15th day of Dawa, highlighting the importance of interfaith harmony, one of His Holiness's 4 principal commitments. In Antwerp, the Regional Deme Association of Belgium organized a special event with talks and Tibetan cultural performances. Sikyong Tsering of the Central Tibetan Administration welcomed a new resolution designating July 6, 2025 as a Day of Compassion, introduced in US Congress by Representatives Michael McCall and Jim McGovern and Senators Jeff Markley and Todd Young, honoring His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama's 90th birthday and to convey support for the Tibetan people. This bipartisan support reaffirms the Tibetan people's right to self-determination and recognizes His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama's lifelong contribution to the preservation of Tibetan culture and a harmonious world. On behalf of Central Tibetan Administration and the Tibetan people, Speaker Khembosnam Tempe and Sikyong Tsering offered heartfelt congratulations to Senator Dean Smith on his appointment as the Shadow Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia. In their congratulatory letters lauding Senator Smith's long-standing support for Tibet, Speaker thanked him for the video message that he shared during the recent 9th World Parliamentarians Convention on Tibet held in Japan, and Sikyong expressed particular gratitude for Senator Smith's instrumental role in the continuation of Special Humanitarian Program for Tibetans in Australia. Representative Kama Singhe of Office of Tibet Australia delivered the congratulatory letters from the Speaker, Sikyong, and Kowloon Nonsuchoma of the Department of Information and International Relations, CTA. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, voiced concerns over the ongoing suppression on cultural and other rights in Tibet, to release all Tibetan political prisoners detained for exercising their rights, and for China to move ahead respecting the international policies and human rights law. Similarly, the European Union and China held the 40th round of their human rights dialogue in Brussels, with EU officials criticizing China's human rights practices, particularly highlighting the situation in Tibet. EU stressed that the selection of religious leaders should happen in accordance with religious norms, including the succession of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and to provide transparency on the enforced disappearance of the 11th Panchen Lama. EU also called on China for immediate release of Tibetan activists, writers and religious leaders, including Khosharab Gyatso, Tashi Dorji, Anya Sengdra, Tsongyön Tsering, Dugda, Lobsang Kheduk and Lobsang Khepel. On Tuesday this week, the Chinese liaison officer Dawa Sangmo of the Office of Tibet Australia attended the book launch of Chen Lai, a formerly imprisoned Australian-Chinese journalist, titled A Memoir of Freedom in Sydney. In a private conversation with Dawa Sangmo, Lai acknowledged the challenges faced by vulnerable diaspora communities, including Tibetans, and specified the importance of democratic allyship among these communities to strengthen collective advocacy. On Monday this week, the Office of Tibet Geneva, led by Representative Tibettv, joined an estimation of 120 Tibetans and Chinese protesters outside the United Nations office as the 59th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council commenced, urging end to China's repression. The protest was organized by a Tibetan community of Switzerland and Liechtenstein. Representative Tibettv, in her speech, emphasized that the oppression extends beyond Tibetans to include Uyghurs and Chinese Christians, and warned of increasing transnational repression by the Chinese government. These efforts, she noted, are designed to silence dissent and intimidate activists and exiles across the world. Representative Tibettv also attended a talk session on Buddhism in the 21st century and joined the 10th Tibetan Language Day in Zurich. Last Saturday, Coordinator Thupten of the Office of Tibet Paris attended the 35th anniversary of the Tibet support group Le Toit du Monde. At the gathering, Thupten read a message from Sigyon Pemba Tsering of the Central Tibetan Administration and expressed heartfelt gratitude for their ongoing support of students, the elderly, and underprivileged communities in India and Nepal, as well as for their various charitable initiatives. Last Wednesday, an event observing the sacred month of Dawa, a spiritually significant period in the Buddhist calendar, was jointly organized by the Office of Tibet Taiwan, Taiwan-based International Tibetan Buddhist Research Association, Taiwan International Tibetan Buddhist Association, the Tibetan Association of Taiwan, and the Center for Tibetan Buddhist Studies at Xuanzang University at the Taipei City Sports Arena. The event was graced by Gyabje Sherpa Choje Rinpoche, Gundilin Tatsa Rinpoche, Kejo Gyaltse Rinpoche, and Digung Khenchen Nyima. Representative Kesang Gyaltsen Bawa of the Office of Tibet Taiwan spoke on the significance of observing Dawa and outlined upcoming plans, including preparations for the forthcoming 90th Global Birthday celebration of His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama. That is all for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. See you next week.